Since much of Square Enix's focus this year has been on the long-awaited Final Fantasy XV, it's easy to forget the company has other titles arriving this fall, one of which also shares its heritage with the company's flagship series. From the title, it might be easy to assume World of Final Fantasy is a new MMO, but it shares more in common with Pokémon and the older entries in the Final Fantasy franchise. It's a unique spin-off that celebrates the series' nearly 30-year history, embracing both the good and the bad habits of Final Fantasy's past. World of Final Fantasy takes place in the world of Grimoire, a magical realm inspired by the various Final Fantasy games. You play as Rain and Lawn, two siblings from another world that have lost their memories. Nudged by divine intervention, the duo sets out on their quest to save Grimoire, aided by a unique power to capture and command various wild creatures called mirages. Along the way, familiar faces like the Warrior of Light, Cloud, and even the goddess herself, Lightning, aid the twins in their adventure. The story lays it on thick in the early goings by dumping a lot of info that takes time to fully process. Eventually, the pacing finds its footing, striking a better balance of action and narrative elements. The plot remains undercooked for quite some time, but reaches its potential by the end, delivering a touching tale with a worthy payoff. World of Final Fantasy also opts to focus on bite-sized narratives, though they all eventually lead back to the main story. These smaller tales always involve famous characters from the Final Fantasy series, but these recognizable faces don't get much screen time. Their presence is definitely felt, but the game moves on from each one far too quickly, only putting them front and center near the very end. Lawn and Rain's dialogue occasionally shows flashes of brilliance, but for each high point, there are just as many uncomfortable exchanges. It's clear the localization team put forth an effort to capture the comedic elements, but it's just too inconsistent. Dialogue with secondary characters fares much better, with the exception of one specific character's quirk of adding "the" in front of random words. It's one of the most annoying things we've heard all year.
It talked with words!
Wow! A talking the mirage!
Seriously?
World of Final Fantasy certainly embraces its heritage right down to the structure of the game. You travel across the world in predictable fashion, find a nearby town, learn of a plight affecting it from its inhabitants, and then journey into a dungeon-like environment to vanquish a foe in order to restore peace and order. Progression is very linear, with few opportunities to alter course. Many of these dungeons are straightforward, but others are more complicated in their design. A few dungeons drag on in the final chapters, but the length of most is just right, even with the game utilizing the infamous random encounter system. Once in battle, things should seem familiar to just about any Final Fantasy veteran, with the turn-based system and combat mechanics, with one notable exception. Throughout Grimoire are numerous wild creatures called mirages, which you can catch during encounters if you meet certain conditions. Once captured, these mirages join your ranks and can fight alongside you, or rather, on top of you. World of Final Fantasy mixes things up by allowing you to stack two mirages together with each main character in battle. There are over 200 types of mirages that come in 3 different sizes, and you can stack one of each size on top of another. Stacking them isn't just for show either. By stacking certain mirages together, you not only gain each one's abilities, but they can actually enhance each other. For example, stacking 2 fire-type mirages can transform the simple fire spell each one has into a more powerful Fira spell. You can experiment, but the best rule of thumb is to try to always stack similar types together to enhance their elemental abilities. It may seem overwhelming, but the harsh truth is that once you've settled on a stack setup you like, you can pretty much brute force your way through most of the game. There are precious few times, mainly during boss encounters, where you have to give a bit more thought to your party's composition, but otherwise, emerging victorious from remedial encounters requires very little strategy. Compounding the dull nature of most encounters is that even with the fastest battle speed setting, combat moves at a snail's pace. It seems Square Enix realized this too, because there is an option to hold down the R1 button to fast forward time during combat to make it bearable. The bottom line is that the majority of the regular battles are just not that fun or rewarding. You'll have to wait for the bosses for anything substantial. Another unique component of combat involves Lawn and Rain's ability to transform between 2 sizes outside of battle, their normal form and pint-sized incarnations, resembling a Funko Pop figure. Their size alters the composition of your stacks, but for most of the game, it doesn't really have a major impact on battles and feels more like a novelty. It isn't until the final portions of the game that this mechanic fully realizes its potential, but by then it's too late. Both the heroes and their mirages will earn experience after each battle, but mirages also net ability points as they level up. You can then spend these points on each Mirage's ability board to unlock new skills and enhance their stats. The boards give you a small degree of freedom in choosing which stats and abilities to unlock first, but it's nothing too complicated. Additionally, if a Mirage reaches a certain level and you have access to a transformation grid on their board, you can then evolve your creature into a new form. There are also more powerful types of Mirages based on the iconic Final Fantasy summons that can only be called into combat one at a time. In addition to the main story, there are a handful of optional side activities to tackle. Standard NPC activities never amount to anything more than simple fetch quests, but at least you can quickly claim your reward via a menu option rather than backtracking to the NPC. The other two types of side quests are far meatier. The first is the Colosseum, which you unlock a few hours into the game. Here, you fight against various teams of Mirages in order to unlock rewards and fight against more challenging opponents. You don't earn experience, but the items awarded are usually worth the effort. These encounters can also serve as a perfect opportunity to catch specific Mirages rather than hunting for them in the wild, and some rare boss-like Mirages are only found here. Finally, there are the intervention quests, which you can undertake by visiting the same NPC in the hub world who sells you champion medals, items that let you summon the Final Fantasy characters in battle to perform outrageously flashy attacks. These intervention quests allow you to gain further insight into the various Final Fantasy champions, while also delivering some of the most challenging and rewarding battles in the game. World of Final Fantasy certainly is an inconsistent yet intriguing experience. There's a touching tale set against wonderful locations and characters drawn from Final Fantasy's rich history, but its best parts are short-lived. The visuals nail the storybook vibe, and they're accompanied by a solid soundtrack featuring original compositions and beautiful new arrangements of classic pieces. Yes, the combat system is obviously heavily influenced by a certain popular Nintendo franchise, but Square Enix has put a unique spin on the formula with the stacking mechanic. However, the main quest is unsatisfying and frequently fails to live up to its potential. Instead, you have to delve into the far more satisfying side quests, which not only better utilize the combat system, but also deliver some of the best moments of the game. With Final Fantasy XV around the corner, it's tempting to dismiss this spin-off, but for those looking for something a bit different that takes the charming style of the older games and infuses it with the Monster Collection craze, World of Final Fantasy could be right up your alley. Easy Allies reviews are made possible by generous viewers just like you. If you like what you see, check out patreon.com/easyallies to see our other videos and consider becoming a patron to help us make more.